For the first time in a long time, I am not worried about the Illini quarterback situation.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Illini. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Simple reminder, we are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Sunny Verma. If you'd like to chat, you can find me on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at IlliniCast or at the Sunny V. If you want to support the program, a simple subscribe and like will suffice. Today's going to be a fun episode. We're going to be talking about Big Ten Media Days. Starts next week, and I will be there at Lucas Oil Stadium. And having said that, that means the football season's right around the corner. I think we're something at 40 some odd days until the Illini will be kicking off. With that being said, as the season starts creeping closer, I figure what I tried to do is kind of go over the major position groups on this Illini football team, give you thoughts on what I think. I'll be referencing Phil Steele's magazine. I'll be referencing Pick Six previews, just trying to gather a community of thoughts and then kind of providing my own, and to kind of let you know how confident I feel on some of the particular players that we have in a locker room, whether I'm confident or whether I'm a little concerned. So we'll kick that position previews off today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone. Every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, as I said at the top of the show, this is the first time I can recall in almost a decade, if not longer, that I'm actually pretty content with what the quarterback's room looks like for the Illini this upcoming year. In previous years, I've been maybe lukewarm, but okay with who our starting quarterback was going to be, but definitely afraid of what might happen should that starter get hurt. This year, things are a little bit different. Obviously, 2 years ago, we had Tommy DeVito, came in, former Syracuse Orangemen quarterback who had a very solid year who played very well for the Illini, so much so that Brett and the staff tried to get him, I believe it would have been a 7th year of eligibility. Unfortunately, the NCAA did not oblige, and Tommy had a okay season for the New York Giants. He certainly at least had his 15 minutes of fame for the Giants. But because we had to kind of move away from Tommy DeVito, what Brett ended up doing was bringing in former 4-star quarterback Luke Altmyer from Ole Miss. So Luke Altmyer and Barry Lundy Jr. got down to work. It wasn't necessarily announced right away last year who was going to be the starting quarterback, but most people knew. They did bring another, at the time, unknown quarterback from Ball State called John Paddock, who was a legacy player who decided to come on and walk on for the Illini last season. But Luke Altmyer, for the most part, was considered coming in to be the starter. And at this point, some of you know who've been watching these shows, who stay tuned for the football segments, I almost feel like I'm alone on Luke Island for this year. I see a lot of people rank their quarterbacks 1 through 18 in the Big Ten. And consistently, Luke is coming in at 13, 14. I even saw one earlier today at 15 while I was doing research for this episode. And honestly, it just genuinely surprises me. I think if you're not an Illini fan, you have images of Luke Altmyer throwing 4 interceptions in the first half against Penn State. And the storyline, the incredible storyline of John Paddock, the last drive against Minnesota, and finishing off last season with some amazing football games. And somehow the perception has become that Luke Altmyer played poorly, and that was the reason he had lost his job. When I I don't think that's the case at all. And the numbers agree with me. In 2023, now keep in mind for the better part of the year, he really didn't have any semblance of a running game and one of the worst offensive lines in the P5. But despite that, Altmyer finished top 5 in the Big Ten in yards per attempt, completion percentage, passing efficiency, and quarterback rushing yards. In all reality, for those first couple games of the season last year, Luke Altmyer was not just our starting quarterback, but he was our best running back as well. It was his ability to scramble that really gave our offense a chance at winning some of these games. Luke was known for that national TV game against Penn State when obviously he threw those 4 interceptions in the first half, which was just easily his worst game as a college football player. And at that point, the narrative was kind of written about him. But honestly, he finished the season on a pretty strong stretch. In his final 6 starts, he completed 65.4% of his passes for over 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, and just 3 interceptions. And that's, again, in tandem with the running ability that he provided, giving our offense multiple weapons. Sure, he eventually conceded his job to a John Paddock, and keep in mind, even that was because John Paddock had the greatest game a quarterback has ever had in an orange and blue jersey. But again, this wasn't a case of a starting quarterback who struggled throughout the season in ideal situations and flat out couldn't get it done. In my opinion, it was the opposite. I think Luke Altmyer was in a position where he was set up to fail with a bad offensive line, with a revolving door at the running back position, who at one point, everyone in that running back room was injured last season. And yet, he actually performed okay. Again, he's a very talented quarterback. Sure, can he change some things? Yeah. Do I wish he had the bravado that Tommy DeVito did? Yeah. And I talked about that, a couple of days ago when he wasn't chosen to be one of the representatives for Big Ten Media Day. I hope he's one of the 3 guys picked in the years moving forward. John Paddock was another guy who had a little bit more assertiveness, an outgoing leadership quality, which other teammates can sense. Luke may need to develop that aspect of his game a little bit more. But in 2024, you're talking about his second full season as a college football quarterback. He's had a year now to kind of soak everything in, catch up to the speed of what college football is like. He's had a full season and an off season of learning what Barry Lunny Jr.'s offense is going to look like. We brought in Zachary Franklin, one of the top wide receivers in all of college football, along with the hoped development of Pat Bryant and Malik Elzy at the running back position. I think the offensive line is going to be one of the better ones in the Big Ten, which is a complete opposite of last year, at least the beginning of last year. Caden Fagan is a candidate to be the next 1,000-yard rusher in the Brett Bielema running back tree. I think right now Luke Altmyer is set up for success for next season, unlike the year before. And should he eventually not, for the first time in a long time, we have guys behind him who I actually would not mind seeing get on the field. Donovan Leary did not see a minute on the football field his first 2 seasons in college football. Generally, when you're a college football coaching staff, if you weren't confident in some of the young players' abilities in your locker room, it would make sense to go out and recruit maybe a veteran transfer, similar to what we did last season with John Paddock. This year, Brett and Barry Lunny Jr. didn't feel the need to do that. And that tells me that they're confident that Leary has what it takes to be the future quarterback of the Fighting Illini. Obviously, Donovan comes from a good bloodline, as his older brother is one of the better college football quarterbacks in recent memory. And when Donovan did get a chance to perform at the Illini spring game, he arguably looked better than Luke Altmyer. Enough so that we even had some outlets like friend of the show, Big Ten Ted, talk about, well, could this be the starting quarterback of the Illini in 2024? Now, I certainly won't go that far, but again, it's because I believe in Luke Altmyer. I have my piece of real estate on Luke Island. But that doesn't mean I'm not excited for what Donovan Leary can bring this football team. And my hopes are that while he is going to be the backup this season, he'll be able to be the starting quarterback before his time is done and Luke Altmyer moves on. And while it seems like the current state of the Illini quarterback room seems in pretty solid hands, for the first time in a long time, we have a couple developmental prospects that I'm pretty happy about too, including Trey Petty, a young high schooler we beat out multiple other P5 programs for, and Cal Swanson, a guy who Brett and the staff continue to try to recruit one quarterback per class. I know in the 2025 right now we have 2 committed, but we'll see where Jashawn Newton ultimately will end up playing on the football field. And if you recall, obviously feel free to go back to the rapid reaction video of Jashawn Newton if you want to see some of his game tape that I got to go over with Justin Adams. But I'm very curious, and I want to hear what you guys think. Do you guys agree with me in that the Illini locker room, that the Illini quarterback situation this year is not really one of my top concerns, or even a concern for this upcoming football season? And I don't remember the last time I said that. Do you believe in Luke Altmyer, or are you a Donovan Leary guy? Do you think Luke lost his job last year? Let me know what you think in the comment section. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I want to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, next up, I'm going to finally be able to play the first half of the interview I did with Ben Beacon on Locked On Wolves. The interview was done a couple days after Terrence was drafted, but a couple days before Summer League started. So, full discretion, some of the opinions you might hear might be dated by now. Ben had his own assertions of what Terrence, his career with Illinois was like. I pushed back a little bit on certain things, and certain things I wish I pushed back a little bit more on. We'll see if you guys can figure out which is what, but let me know in the comments if you think I was wrong on certain takes. Let me know if you think Ben had certain things wrong. But here we are, my interview with Ben Beacon from Locked On Wolves.
All right, as promised, conversation crossover between Locked On Wolves and Locked On Illini. Myself, Sonny Verma. We're going to talk a little bit of Terrence Shannon Jr. and what he brought to Illinois when he was there. And then we'll talk about his potential role in the NBA. Will he be in the Wolves rotation? What will he do for the Timberwolves this year? So, I mean, Sonny, so Terrence Shannon spent his final 2 years at Illinois. He spent 3 years at Texas Tech, a couple years at Illinois. He was a relative unknown, unless you're a hardcore college basketball fan, until he got to Illinois. And then really kind of exploded. You look at his 2 years with the Illini, and he had barely averaged in double figures his last year at Texas Tech in 21-22. The scoring spiked. Certainly his second to last year with Illinois, but then of course this year he's one of the best players in the country over the first few months. And I guess like for Wolves fans, for listeners who didn't follow him closely in college, or maybe only saw him maybe when he played against the Gophers,
Sure.
what should Timberwolves fans know about Terrence Shannon Jr.? What do you see from him as a player, or what did you see from him over his 2 years at Illinois?
I think I talked about this actually on my own show. Whatever team that was lucky to draft him should know that whatever his potential is, he's going to reach it, because he's not one of those people that's going to become lackadaisical once he signs that contract and just kind of, go with the flow type of thing. No, he was a guy who was constantly the star of all of Illinois', like the official university social media campaigns, because they'd film him basically shooting jumpers at 5 a.m, 7 a.m. The guy was a complete workhorse. And as you talked about, essentially every single year in his career, he continued to get better. There was a different facet of his game that continued to get better. The guy is super athletic. He's had an NBA body for 2 seasons now in college basketball, which kind of leads into why he was so successful. He was just bigger and stronger than most of the guys that he was going up against. And so, if we're talking about, what kind of guy he is, it's just that he's a pure hustler, and he's a guy who won't leave anything out on the floor. We'll leave everything out on the floor. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and that's great to hear. I mean, that's something that, like, if fans are just looking at highlight reels or scouting reports online, they're not necessarily going to get all of that, which is exactly, what fans want to hear, is that he's going to reach, because you look at, I know he's a 5-year college player, so he's a little bit older in terms of NBA prospects, but somebody who averaged 23 points a game last year, 17 points a game the year prior, like, clearly there's massive potential there. And so to hear that he's somebody who's going to reach that potential, or at least work to reach that potential, is huge. What would you say from year 1 at Illinois, which was his 4th year of college basketball, to year 2 at Illinois? What was his biggest growth point? Like, what do you think he did, that much better in his final year than he did in his first year at Illinois?
I mean, it was the shooting. He did the NBA draft camps last year, and that's kind of the feedback that he got, that he needed to work on his 3-point shooting a little bit. And there were some questions about his back. So his first couple of seasons at Texas Tech, he missed significant portions of the season because he had some sort of back issues. Now, you wouldn't know this, but like, Illinois has one of the best strength and fitness guys in their locker room. And so his name's Adam Fletcher. He basically took Terrence Shannon, and for the 2 seasons, Terrence had almost 0 issues with his back. So it looks like that is kind of healed. And so basically it was just his shooting from 3-point land, from the corners. That's kind of what, because he always had the NBA body. He's got NBA defense, NBA strength, NBA athleticism, but in order to, the NBA has kind of become a 3-and-D league. And the key part of Shannon developing was the 3 part. And that's kind of what he did last season.
Yeah. And to your point, first year at Illinois, he shot 32.1% from 3. Last year, 36.2%. And if you just glance at his numbers, his last year at Texas Tech, he shot 38%, but the volume was a lot lower. He attempted just like sheer volume of threes almost twice as many his first year at Illinois versus his last year at Texas Tech. So, the 38% is a little bit misleading, but then last year he attempted nearly 3 times as many threes as he did last year at Texas Tech, and he was still north of 36%. So if that continues to progress to the NBA 3-point line, that's obviously a huge, and the Wolves are banking on that. And you mentioned the NBA body. That's kind of the first thing I've said when I've been asked about what he brings to the Timberwolves, what they're looking for. It's that he looks the part. He looks like he can be, at the very least, a solid perimeter defender, maybe be able to guard at the point of attack a little bit, and should be an absolute terror in transition. It seems like that could be his biggest impact initially at the NBA level. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he did a ton of damage in transition, both from beyond the arc and also at the rim.
That's what he was best at in the college level. Once he got a quick rebound, there was nobody better in the league in transition, of just kind of putting his head down and attacking the rim. I mean, he scared a lot of the guys basically defending him. And I think that's what he's going to kind of do ultimately in the NBA. He's a guy who his defensive numbers fell a little bit his senior year, but that's only because he was asked to carry so much on the offensive end. He was the focal point. We had him guard the best guy, also being our number one option to score the basketball. In the NBA, when you have guys who are, Anthony Grant, and no one's going to ask Terrence Shannon to score even double figures. The idea, I'm assuming, is going to be, hey, make a basket here and there, grab the outlet rebound, go do your thing, what you just did in college. But most importantly, and I know you guys were one of the best defensive teams in the league already last year, he's going to, if you tell Terrence, hey, expend most of your energy guarding and harassing the guy that you're defending that night, he's going to absolutely excel in that role. And that's why I think he's going to be a Minnesota Timberwolves fan favorite very quickly.
Yeah, so I actually, you mentioned two things I was going to ask you about, and I guess let's talk about the defense first, because you kind of finished there. I was going to ask you what your overall impressions were for him on defense. I think I saw at least one scouting report out there when I was kind of cramming on Terrence Shannon around the time of the draft, that there was some concern that maybe the effort wasn't always there at Illinois, where maybe it was greater, at least maybe year one in Illinois or back to Texas Tech years. And to your point, it sounds like some of that could be because he was carrying so much of the load offensively. He was such a high usage player on offense for Illinois. And then, just looking at the numbers, I like to look at steal rate as a good indicator of defensive activity. And the steal rate was certainly down last year over where it was year one in Illinois. But would you chalk most of that up to A, carrying a huge load on offense, and B, having a really difficult assignment night in and night out, really on both ends of the floor, but also defensively?
Exactly right. He was always, when it was time, if there's a minute and a half left in the game, in a close game, he's the guy guarding their best player. And for the most of the time, he ended up on the winning end. Like, he's just that guy. Throughout the game, sure, sometimes things happen. And again, when you're carrying the load offensively, his numbers may have struggled a little bit. And truth be told, Illinois' defense in general this past season wasn't very good. We were number one in offense for most of the college basketball season, but the defensive end really started sliding once the month of January hit, and so his numbers included. But I don't think it's an effort issue necessarily, and I truly think that once he gets to the next level and he's told by the coach, hey, just focus on defense, I think he's going to absolutely excel at that role.
That's great to hear. I mean, like you said this a few minutes ago, like the Wolves do have multiple point of attack defenders who they're not going to ask him to go guard, insert, like he's not going to guard John Morant one night and Kevin Durant the next or whatever. It's, they've got Jaden McDaniels, who, an all defensive team caliber player. Rudy Gobert obviously is not guarding on the perimeter, but he's on the floor. So he's papering over if guys get beat on the perimeter. But Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards are all plus perimeter defenders. And then, you add in some of the other length that they have, even guys like Karl-Anthony Towns who can switch on the perimeter and stuff like that. It's just really, it's length and athleticism and again, an NBA body. Offensively, we talked about what he does in transition. You talked about his improvement as a 3-point shooter in the half court. So not in transition, when things slow down there in the half court, it seems like he had the ball in his hands a ton. Was he really initiating a lot of offense? Was it a lot of shooting out of pick and roll, or what, or how would you describe his half court game with Illinois?
I actually wouldn't say he had the ball all that often, unless it was one of those in transition. Again, that's kind of give the ball to Terrence and move out of the way, let him go get a basket. I mean, if you take a look, I think he averaged almost 9 free throws a game in his last season, and shooting almost 80%. The whistle follows him wherever he goes. He's very good at initiating contact and getting to the free throw line. And when he gets there, he tends to hit them. Brad Underwood always liked to joke around all season long that all year long, he never ran a single play for Terrence Shannon Jr. It was simply one of those where either through sheer hustle, he got involved with the play. He developed a catch and shoot 3-pointer in his final season at Illinois. So it's one of those where it's perfect for Minnesota because you have so many weapons as it is, and he's not really going to get in the way of a guy like Anthony Edwards. It's basically he'll be able to fill whatever niche you're looking for on the offensive side. And for me, when I watch the NBA, I do love guys who can get contact, who can get fouls on the opposing team and, get them in foul trouble. And that's something Terrence has always been really, really good at.
Yeah. And I've kind of been talking about his fit with Minnesota, and we'll get into this here in a second, a little bit more in depth, but I mean, they're not going to ask him to do too much. It's going to be, hey, knock down threes, play in transition, play good defense. And if he does reach that ceiling that you alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, like, if there's a good chance he reaches that, it's obviously still a very high ceiling, and every team can use a scorer off the bench. And 2-3 years down the road, I mean, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a free agent next year, so his role could increase as we move forward. Let's get into that next. Let's talk about his fit with Minnesota. And Sonny's we're gonna turn the tables here. He's gonna ask me a few questions about Terrence Shannon Jr. as a pro. We'll get to that here next.
Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So that was the first half of the interview I did with Ben. I'll air part 2 tomorrow. Tomorrow's episode is going to have more so what Terrence's role on Minnesota is going to be, and we kind of hear Ben's thoughts. Obviously he covers Minnesota, so he has a better idea of who the players are, and we find out exactly where he thinks that Terrence is going to fit in the rotation, or is he? And again, these thoughts were gathered before Summer League started, so he may have changed his mind. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Locked On Illini. On your way out, please, if you can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I would sincerely appreciate it. Just remember, I'm the only source for daily Illini content. It's not the easiest thing to do during the off season, but because of your guys' support, because of your guys' comments, your likes, and the fact that the channel is growing every single day, we have more views and audio downloads every week. That is motivating me to keep going. And so I sincerely appreciate that. Well, enjoy and have a safe day. I'll see you tomorrow.